Hello and welcome to Politics. Today I am Farrukh Pitafi. Today we are going to talk about Afghanistan again because Afghanistan's situation keeps on deteriorating and it seems that the world might be engaged but it isn't engaged to the level which might avert a humanitarian crisis. If you have seen the United Nations Secretary General's statement, he actually raised alarm on two things. One, that the Afghan Taliban have not been able to fulfill their promises that they made regarding human rights, regarding women, education and all. And he said that that actually adversely affects the society and the country. On the other side, he also talked about the economic crisis and how economics, unraveling economic situation is going to really negatively affect Afghanistan. Then there was a third warning by the Prime Minister of Pakistan, and that was also important, that if the US and the West and other countries don't engage with the Afghan Taliban, the hardliners will gain more ground within their movement. And that is also important. The fourth issue that is very important, hardly ever said, is about the limit of Pakistan's advocacy for Afghan Taliban's engagement. Why? There has to be a certain limit until you can actually advocate for Afghan Taliban before, instead of remaining an advisor, a counsel, you become a target. We know that there are two elements which are very important in the West. One, who keep on trying to blame Pakistan for everything that has been going on. There is a lobbying effort which goes on. On the other side, we have also seen that the US, for a better part of 2 decades, kept on telling its people that it was fighting Afghan Taliban, not only Al-Qaeda. So today, that power is, that force that you were fighting is in power in Kabul, and these questions are then repeatedly asked, what became of the 20 years effort? We are going to introduce the panel. We are going to discuss how things go ahead, because there was a meeting between Afghan Taliban and US representatives as well. But before that, there is a package. Let's watch that.
The Taliban are holding joint face-to-face talks with the European and US envoys as they are pursuing their diplomatic push for international support. Afghanistan's new rulers are seeking recognition as well as assistance to avoid a humanitarian disaster after they returned to power in August following the withdrawal of US troops after 20 years of war. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres urged the world to donate more money to Afghanistan to head off its economic collapse, but also slammed the Taliban's broken promises to Afghan women and girls. Also, the US delegation described the US-Taliban meeting as the continuation of Washington's pragmatic engagement with the Taliban on issues of vital national interest and reiterated that any legitimacy must be granted through the Taliban government's own actions, not only its words. In an interview with foreign media, the Prime Minister Imran Khan, while stressing the need for the international community to engage with the Taliban, said that the world must engage with Afghanistan. Isolating and imposing sanctions on Afghanistan would result in a massive humanitarian crisis. He also pointed out that the Taliban had assured Pakistan it would not let Afghanistan's soil be used against any country. He was also of the view that it is not the time to show alliance either with the US camp or China. We all should prioritize what is favorable for this entire region. The regime, still yet to be recognized as a legitimate government by any other country, is also facing a threat from Daesh, who have launched a series of deadly attacks. Events in Afghanistan are still evolving, and the Taliban are facing multiple challenges. Let's hope, for the sake of people of Afghanistan, that these issues get resolved.
Right. Despite the meeting between the US and Afghan Taliban, we heard Suhail Shaheen also, who said that there won't be any cooperation between the US and Afghan Taliban on the issue of Daesh. That is also quite an interesting aspect that one has to look at. Now, without wasting any time, let me bring in the panel. I'm joined by Barrister Mohammad Ali Saab, who is a remarkable resource when it comes to these matters. Not only he is a Pashtun, but he understands the political topography of the entire region, holds 3 PhDs apart from barred at law. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal Sahab, who is an expert on foreign relations, international relations and foreign affairs, joins us also, and he is also my teacher. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Although I don't know whether I look older or he does, but he is my teacher. The third guest is Tariq Farhadi Saab, who is a senior regional analyst, also an Afghan, joins us on Skype. Tariq Farhadi Saab, thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. We have one more guest, who is Mushtaq Yousafzai, who is an expert on Afghan affairs. Thank you very much, sirs, for being part of the program. With your permission, gentlemen, let me start with the studio. Let me very quickly bring in Barrister Muhammad Ali Sahib, your take on the future of Afghanistan and how the world is actually treating the matter.
Well, it's quite obvious that Afghanistan at present is a country in turmoil. It has recently been taken over by a guerrilla movement which waged its armed campaign for the last 20 years. And unfortunately, it had to enter Kabul and confront a situation which was like where there was no state apparatus left. There was no government. And they just had to fill in a vacuum created by the sudden I won't call it withdrawal, because withdrawal is an orderly, a movement.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was like just a sudden, I would say, running away of a power which occupied, which in fact created or rather exacerbated the situation even more. If Taliban had been handed over the reins of power by in an organized manner by a government which was occupying Argin, Kabul, then probably the situation would have been a little bit different. But the moment they entered, they confronted and they faced chaos. And I believe now.
Am I correct in assuming that you are saying that at this moment Afghan Taliban don't know what they are doing, and the world doesn't know what it is doing?
No, I believe that Afghan Taliban are just trying to handle the situation which they have, which they are facing at the moment. Most of this situation is not of their making and it's not of their choice, but they have to confront it. Number one, with extremely meager resources, the coffers are almost empty. Also, it's the governance system has collapsed, so they need to restart that as well in order to make it deliver to the public. That is why you see all these demands for international assistance, financial assistance, and humanitarian assistance. And Pakistan and some countries have also
contributed. And we still have to see how much need there is. Let me bring in Dr. Jaspal Sahab, your take on the same question.
I think that I concur with the Barrister Sahab that there was a vacuum which was filled by the Taliban. Everyone was expecting that they were coming. But we were not expecting this kind of a sudden exit of the American, or without any negotiated
or sudden collapse
of the Afghan government. And in such a situation, when the vacuum was created, naturally they filled the vacuum with a big bang. But at the same time, I fail to understand in the last 20 years, despite the Americans' claims that they invested a lot in the Afghanistan, Afghanistan failed to generate any self-sustaining economic activity within the country. So we can say that there could be a management problem, there could be some other these kind of the problems, but there is another important thing, that where the management has gone. Because if the bureaucracy has left, but there must be some resources. The worst thing is that what they did is they just closed their foreign exchange reserves, and by this way they are blackmailing them. So naturally, when there are no frozen assets, bureaucracy is not ready to work, international community is not clear how to deal with them, and then the losers are asking the victors, you can do this, this, this. This is a reality, we have to live with that. So agreed that these losers are blackmailing the Taliban, but they fail to understand Taliban won the war.
Right, but the losers actually control the purse strings, and that actually is a big problem with a country that doesn't have that kind of finances. Let me go to Tariq Farhadi Sahab. Sir, your take. Last time we spoke, you still had some hope that there will be some kind of transformation in Afghanistan that will be inclusive. Is it the end of that illusion, or do you still hope that something good can materialize in Afghanistan?
Greetings to you and to our viewers and the guests. I will summarize the situation for you. The world now is preparing for a collapse of Afghanistan. The Secretary General of the United Nations came out on a podium and said the economy is going to collapse. And because the economy is going to collapse, there's going to be a movement of refugees from Afghanistan to Pakistan, Iran, and Tajikistan. And Europe has approached all these countries to propose funds in order to contain the refugees at the border, basically, because Europe does not have any appetite to receive any refugees from Afghanistan. French elections are in May of 2022. It's a very charged issue, the issue of refugees. And today, even President Erdogan said at the G20 meeting, we do not have any appetite for refugees any longer. G20 proposed to have a trip by the foreign minister of Turkey to Kabul to come and have a candid conversation with Taliban. That's one issue. The Taliban, senior Taliban, have reached out to us, to me, and said, what should we do? We have said honestly, look, what the international community is saying is aside. You have won the war, okay. But now you might lose a big economic war, which will cause anguish and poverty for Afghan families, which are in tent cities right now. And these tent cities are going to move to neighboring countries soon. We have said to the Taliban, I have written to the Taliban, please enlarge the government. Please show flexibility, because the conditionalities that the international community is asking for is things that can be done. Yes, there's all kinds of matters of closing the schools, because in some parts of Afghanistan, people don't want their daughters to go to school, but that is not the majority of Afghanistan, and the Taliban cannot decide for the majority of Afghanistan. So we have said that. We have said that to the Taliban. We have written, we have had this conversation with them. Total silence. To this minute, we have not shown.
Farhadi Sahab, as I come back to you, we are going to focus more on how the world can help Afghanistan and how Afghan Taliban can help the world in doing that. Allow me to bring in Mushtaq Yousafzai Sahab. Sir, your take on Afghanistan's situation right now. I'm particularly interested, and I will be obliged if you can tell us also about what is going on ground, because it is very important. At this moment, there seems to be food inflation, there seems to be a collapsing money, there seems to be a lot of other problems and collapse of amenities as well. Please, sir, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Actually, the Taliban right now are facing multiple challenges, multiple problems. Right now, they need economic assistance. They don't have funds. They don't have fund resources to pay salaries. Now they're asking people, government servant, to come to their jobs, and some of the people already joined. And the Taliban are claiming that somehow they manage to pay last month's salaries, but even then they don't have that much money. And then they have some security issues as well, because they are now passing a very difficult phase, because they don't have a regular trained army, they don't have regular police. So actually, different multiple problems, and they are facing also security issues from Islamic State. You might have seen some devastating blast. The recent was in Kunduz. They are in touch with multiple powers, and in Afghanistan recently they told us that they asked the UN to allow them to start trade with China, because they can manage to get some resources, some fund from China. And they also held some meeting with the ambassadors of Islamic countries in Afghanistan, and they urged them to help them.
Right. About what you said
these
earlier,
issues.
sorry to cut you, but you were talking about Islamic State and how Daesh poses a challenge to Afghan Taliban. How do you see this statement coming from Suhail Shaheen about not cooperating with the US in fighting against ISK? One thought that it was a match made in heaven because ISK is actually harassing everybody. So there was some interest to work together. Why actually dispel it? Yusuf
You're
Zaida.
asking me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think, Prime Minister Imran Khan also recently stated that only the Afghan Taliban can defeat Daesh or the Islamic State. Right now, you might have seen the Taliban are very much worried about the rise of militancy, especially from Daesh. And there are reasons. There are reasons because the Taliban believed that they would not have security issues from the previous Afghan government. The Afghan government unexpectedly, dissolved, people just disappeared. But now the Taliban are worried about Daesh, Islamic State. Why? Because they believe that people opposed to their policies, their enemies, their opponents will join Daesh, and Daesh will welcome them. They are also worried about some external powers, and they have mentioned some countries that they are trying to use and run Daesh as a project. So that's why they are worried. And
Right,
especially
and that's why this statement. Right, sir. I'm going to come back to you, Yusuf Zai Sahab. Allow me to return to the studio. Barrister Sahab, you have, heard the commentary from the, especially from the Afghan experts as well. Now, the question at this moment is, Pakistan is in a position where it has to actually go for a tightrope walk. On one side, you have to actually advocate that Afghanistan should not be abandoned. On the other side, the fear is that Afghanistan's chaos can overwhelm Pakistan as well. I mean, TTP, still it is out there and functioning. On the other side, economic crisis, Pakistan's rupee keeps on weakening, the US dollar keeps on strengthening because the word has it that it is being smuggled to Kabul. So what exactly is Islamabad's policy on these matters right now?
Well, I believe that whatever policy we formulate in relation to Afghanistan must be based on one prime concern, and that is that there is no way on earth that we remain isolated from Afghanistan. Whatever happens, good or bad, it is going to affect Pakistan in a positive or negative way, right? So now whatever is the the state of affairs in Afghanistan right now is, Pakistan must try its best to bring stability and peaceful situation in Afghanistan.
How?
And
it is a separate country.
That, yes, it is, no doubt, no doubt. That's exactly what I'm saying. How to run their administration, what to do inside the borders of Afghanistan, that's primarily the responsibility of the Afghan government, whosoever is in Kabul right now. But we must assist them in whatever way we can as a neighboring country, because they are our neighbors, and it's the irony of geography that we cannot separate ourselves from their problems, or we cannot isolate ourselves from their problems. Now, my concern is that the government of Pakistan, like yesterday, the Prime Minister asked the international community to support Afghanistan, to engage with Taliban in order to avoid such issues as you have just seen in Kunduz and the attacks by ISIS, because if Taliban government remains weaker financially, administratively, security wise, there will definitely be this vacuum, and it will be filled by those organizations which are comparatively more organized. Now, Daesh is an organization with a highly virulent extremist radical ideology, number one, and they are in the business for the last several years in this region. Now they see a vacuum, they have entered and they have conducted their operations, which leads to the instability in Afghanistan. But at the same time, in my opinion, let this winter season pass, and then you will see if Taliban do not come to grips with the situation, there is a possibility that there may be other groups, anti-government groups, anti-Taliban groups, which may get organized, and they may also start conducting such operations. So as Farhadi Saab said, I totally agree with him. I think the world is waiting for Afghanistan to collapse And that is why there is no help, there is no recognition, there is no support. It is the responsibility of international community, not just Pakistan, to strengthen Taliban's, to strengthen the government in Afghanistan right now.
To strengthen Afghanistan, actually.
Afghanistan, yeah, but Afghanistan can only be strengthened if they have a peaceful setup there.
Right. With your permission, let me bring in, go back to Dr. Jaspal. Dr. Saab, earlier, Barrister Saab was saying that there is a tyranny of geography, that Pakistan has to worry about what is going on in Afghanistan. Last time I checked, Afghanistan had many countries bordering it, not only Pakistan. The other countries have created a buffer, they are taking care of their own security, and then they actually focus on these matters. Why is it that it is only Pakistan which is so vocal about this matter?
I think that if you see topography of the Afghanistan, you find that the natural flow is towards Pakistan. And majority of the areas, or you can say Pashtun speaking, or these community or cultural linkages are with Pakistan. And when you say that, let's say looking towards the Iran is not very comfortable with the Afghan because of the ideological reason. Now they're cultivated, but generally we have seen. And from the northern side, when you go with the Central Asia, thinly populated territory, or that's why. And if you see that Uzbek, Tajiks, they are communities which have a affiliation there, but they are very much lesser in number. So major population, and that, and if you see historically, the route for the Afghanistan's outlet trade for their going out, that was Pakistan, and that was, and then since last 4 decades, our communication, our hospitality for the refugees, our other interests, whether we were fighting against with the Mujahideens against the you can say Soviets and these kind of things that make us more nearer. Second is that we have to not forget about the spillover impact.
Right.
If we have seen that,
if I recall correctly, last time when you were here, you also spoke about not only refugee crisis possibility, but also that Afghan Taliban winning in Afghanistan and
that ideological impact
will have ideological impact.
And
it is happening.
It's a morale booster for the here
PTP and other groups.
The radicalized militant organization. Then we have to also here admit this, that in the last 4 decades, I think that instead of last 3 years, out of that 37 years, we were not managing the border correctly. If you see on the Uzbekistan or other neighboring states, they do not permit that anybody can go for a crossing without any legal, they shoot it.
Right.
Our attitude, you can say, law enforcement agencies' attitude, our political attitude, and our people who have been residing there, whatever the reasons could be, we cannot go into detail. We virtually erase the border significance, and now we start building. So
now we have a very
now we start building. I am saying last 3-4 years. So by this way, virtually border is now there, and we are trying to manage it. So, but what you can do with this spillover? Look, we were the state which created the Mujahideen. We were part of that. They were all residing here. They moved from here. Then Haqqani Madrasa, then the other madrasa. So we have many ethnic, cultural, political, historical linkages with this kind of thing. So that's why we are more vulnerable to them.
Right.
And then the most important thing is that why we must be worried that we are in a strategic competition with India. India is a defense partner, though they have differences with Iran. India investing in Afghanistan to create problems for Pakistan. So and we are also worried because of this proxy war within the Afghanistan.
But India hardly seems to have any skin in the game right now.
No,
it doesn't have any presence on the ground.
Please, this is an important point we have to keep in mind. Taliban government is there. I agree with you 100% that at the moment maybe they don't have you can say advantageous position at the government level. But within Afghanistan society, within the Afghanistan bureaucracy, they have a 2 decades investment.
Right.
So that's why I think we are more alarmed.
Right. I'm told that a little bit later, Farhadi Saab has to go. So let me ask Farhadi Saab for some kind of recommendation to the world. I understand that here and there are efforts to provide Afghan people with some kind of economic solace. But is there a possibility that we can see some kind of coherent activity, effort, some kind of fund for Afghanistan that actually has grassroots access and can ensure that women, children, vulnerable parts of the society and regular Afghans also have access to food, medicine, shelter, peace. Winters are coming and winters are very harsh in Kabul and across Afghanistan. Please go ahead, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. 3 points. On the former discussion, Afghanistan now, Taliban are increasingly becoming a liability for Pakistan, unfortunately. So we all have a role to reach out to the Taliban. We are doing our part, but our important neighbors have to do it as well. 2, your question, the world. The world has limitations. G20, the United Nations, I have spent my entire career with them, extremely bureaucratic mechanism. The UNDP has said now that it will fly cash to Afghanistan to give cash to poor families. But to how many families? In what point of Afghanistan? Where? The crisis is much bigger than what a failing development system can solve here. Poverty is going to come, winter is going to come, people are going to have to live out of hunger. What we need to do, which costs less, and I'm doing my part, reaching out and being in a conversation with senior Taliban, please open up the government, please make it more open, bring some experts to qualify for the conditions that the international community is posing. We don't want to be ministers, we don't want to be deputy ministers, but make some cosmetic admissions inside the government so that this looks like we are all working together.
Right, and that actually sounds really heartening. But earlier you talked about cash being flown in, and given that you have actually in the past advised the former president of Afghanistan, Hamid, let me ask you, one news item that came to our attention was about the fact that Afghanistan doesn't print its own money. It has to be actually printed in Europe and then it has to be brought into Afghanistan. Why was there such a mechanism? Why not have the capacity within the country, sir?
20 years ago, when we printed the money, we were asked the question by the printer, would you like to print money inside Afghanistan? We said no, because printing money inside the country allows for decisions of power, whoever is in power to print money, but then the money becomes increasingly worthless. So we wanted to keep this mechanism at that time. I was involved in that decision at that time. And Afghanistan prints its money right now in Germany and Poland. But in order for the Taliban to print money, they have to be a legitimate government recognized by the international community for printing companies to print this money. So in fact, the Taliban are now dealing with the stock of money which is circulating inside Afghanistan. Dollar reserves are dwindling because traders who buy from Pakistan and Iran food items and who buy from Uzbekistan petroleum have to spend these dollars to pay their bills to the extent they can, because a lot of bills are unpaid now, especially for electricity with Uzbekistan. And this is why the UNDP wants to fly in dollars and give it to the people to trickle into the economy. But this will be very limited. It's not a cure.
Before I let you go, very quickly, any predictions about the future of Afghani, the Afghan currency? Do you think that it is going to continue, or there is a possibility that it might collapse in coming days if these measures are not taken, the ones you mentioned?
The Afghani will stay because nobody wants Afghanis. It's a money in circulation inside Afghanistan, but nobody wants Afghanis outside Afghanistan. So the stock of Afghani is circulating. It has a certain value. It hasn't really devalued a lot. It has devalued about 10–15% to the dollar, but it's in a locked system. So for now, because nobody wants Afghanis outside Afghanistan, the Afghanis are staying inside Afghanistan. They are going to become very old and difficult to deal with as a physical bill or currency. But before that, there has to be some solution that the Taliban should find legitimacy so they can print currency. They have to accept
Right,
world's
and that is a very good point, sir. Well made. Tariq Faradi sir, thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Very quickly, let me go to Mushtaq Yusuf Zahi sahab. Regarding economic situation on the ground, I understand that we are talking mostly about Afghan Taliban and how they are actually dealing with the policy issues. But let me ask you about a common Afghan on the street, how these circumstances are treating him. Do you think that circumstances have started improving, or the governance vacuum created by the previous government has not been filled by the current government, but de facto government at any rate?
Not yet, because people are still have some doubts, reservation. They're not satisfied with the Taliban government. Even if you talk to the Taliban, who suffered losses, even they are not satisfied with their government because they don't have proper system. They don't have the government departments, institutions. So people have a lot of problems. And then you might have seen those who could afford, who could manage, they already left Afghanistan somehow. Those who were associated with foreign NGOs, embassies and other organizations, they managed to go at that time when the US was, sending planes to just carry these people. Still, there are people who are still trying to leave Afghanistan, but they can't. And now the Taliban agreed to allow those Afghan who have foreign citizenship. And now the US and the Afghan Taliban agreed in their last meeting in Doha that they will not create problems for these people. So that is another challenge. But the Taliban will have to realize now that they are no more in war. They are now the rulers of Afghanistan. And, in Taliban and in guerrilla war, anybody who has fighters, resources, he is actually dictating and he's calling the shots. So you might have seen some groups are very powerful, and Sirajuddin Haqqani, who is leader of the Haqqani network. Haqqani network is very much effective militant group within the Afghan Taliban. So that was the group that captured Kabul, and that is the group that has this large number of commandos that is called Badri 313. And then Mullah Yaqub is the Afghan Taliban defense minister. He's very powerful, and he actually led
Son
this.
of Mullah Umar.
Mullah Omar. And he actually led this war against the Afghan government to, initially they had a plan to start capturing districts and then wait for some time for the US withdrawal. But it was Mullah Yaqub. And imagine he was so powerful that he decided to go after, the Afghan troops and provinces. And the Taliban didn't face any resistance. And someone among the panelists said that it was even unexpected for the Afghan Taliban because the Taliban were telling us that they will not go to Kabul. And they were
Yusuf
worried.
Mullah Yaqub is what, 31 years old?
He is 30 plus, 35, 34, and he is very active. And these two men are very much powerful. Sirajuddin Haqqani, who is the interior minister.
And that's a very good point. And with that, I have to actually move to the next question. Whether the world will be recognizing Afghan Taliban's government in coming days or not. I'm going to bring the question back to the studio. Because it is the final round, you will add also, I will request you to add your conclusion as well. But whether there will be, barristers, of any recognition at all by any country?
Well, recognition is basically a political, an issue of political credibility and legitimacy. It has a legal as well as political connotation. And of course, the manifestations of recognition are then close interaction, diplomatic exchange and all those things.
Right.
So far, I believe that the Western powers would refrain from recognizing Taliban government only in order to pressurize them to succumb to their demands.
Okay.
Or to
Which are?
Which are basically one is venting out their frustration because they were responsible for throwing
The
them out of
collapse of
Afghanistan.
Afghan
Yes,
government,
number one, and the second is that these collateral demands or these other I would say minor demands that they have,
Human rights?
human rights and women
They're
rights
minor?
and this and that. No, I call them minor in the sense that when Americans or the US or the coalition government was forces were in Afghanistan and they were ruling Afghanistan, they never cared for human rights at that time. Now suddenly after the
That's a
Taliban's
very good
entry
point.
into Kabul, they have suddenly remembered that human rights is also an issue there and women education is also an issue there. Of course it is an issue, no doubt about it, but the point is that Afghanistan has already ratified some of the major human rights conventions,
Right.
and also some other international legal instruments, which obliges the state of Afghanistan to respect those human rights.
Right.
But in order to compel the Afghan government to abide by those conventions
You have
and
to
those
recognize
obligations,
them.
you have to recognize them, and they are failing to recognize them. And even in Doha agreement, in these Doha parleys just going on recently, yesterday, they refused to
Concede
accept,
that.
yeah, to concede that demand.
Right, that is quite interesting. Dr. Saab, let me ask you. Barrister Saab said that the Western powers are not going to recognize Afghanistan's government, the de facto government. Are the Eastern powers going to recognize Afghan Taliban?
I think that everyone is trying to convince the Afghan Taliban for the sake of themselves. Afghan Taliban or Taliban government had already promised to the Chinese, Russians, Pakistanis and other neighboring states that they will not permit their territory to be used against them.
Right.
I think it's this assurance is more than enough if we can rely on them. Second is that why the Western powers, and they are also pushing us. For example, Americans are saying that relations with Pakistan will be judged how the Taliban are going to behave. Now in this context, they are basically trying to, you can say, hide their defeat with this kind of tactics. They are trying to convince their own people, and they said that okay, we left, they left unceremoniously, but at the same time we ensure that they will be not successful.
Okay.
So if somebody is expecting that the Americans or the Western powers or the NATO countries, they willfully join hands for the sake of Taliban government success,
Right.
in real politics it doesn't work.
Will Russia officially recognize Afghan Taliban as the government? Will China in coming days? Will Muslim countries, including Turkey, Pakistan and other countries, Iran?
My understanding is that they will sooner or later, but it's time the Chinese must come out and recognize them and provide them economic service, because the Chinese have a more bigger, you can say, stakes in Afghanistan, and then the Russians as well, and of course Pakistan and
Yeah, that is a good advice, but the reports we keep on hearing is on the contrary. No country is ready at
because
this moment.
everyone has they try to, for example, because of the terrorist group, but they're failing to realize what the Prime Minister Imran Khan has told them, that if you are not engaging them, then the power of the other will start increasing. Because if you are not engaging them, they are not getting foreign assistance. Naturally, they fail, as earlier it was pointed out, that if they will fail by spring, new groups will emerge. So, are you interested in anarchy continuity in the Afghanistan?
Why not?
Yeah,
that is a big question. Because they would say it is not our headache. Let me very quickly ask Mushtaq Yousafzai Saab about recognition. Is any country going to recognize Afghan Taliban in the condition the movement or government is? And then you can add conclusion like our other guests as well, sir. Very quickly, sir.
Well, I don't think so, because right now any country will avoid to recognize them individually. And some of the countries like Pakistan, China, Iran, Turkey, and some other countries, they are in negotiation. And according to the Afghan Taliban, these countries have offered them support, and they are encouraging them, but they are not in a position to recognize them because of the pressure from the US and some other regional powers. And as I mentioned, the Taliban recently held some meetings with ambassadors in Kabul, and they had told them that this is the right time. If you want to support us, if you want to recognize us, this is the time. And if some other major powers like the United States later recognize them and support them, and then you come to us. that we are going to support you, we are going to recognize you, that will be meaningless. So the Taliban are desperate. But as I mentioned, the Taliban will have to deliver. They will have to realize their responsibilities. They are no more in war. They are rulers, and they have to respect human rights. They have to deliver. They have to assure the Afghan people without any ideology and any prejudice that they are equal to them. So there are
That's
some stories
that's again
which
a
are very
great
damaging.
That's again a great advice, but with due respect, we have been, the entire world have been at it for past 1 month at least. It doesn't seem that there are many takers in Kabul regarding this advice. But I'm told that we have to conclude the program here. Mushtaq Yusuf Zai Sahab, thank you very much for being part of the program. Barrister Muhammad Ali Saif Sahab, always great having you in the show. Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal Sahab, always great. It is a teaching moment. I keep on learning from both of you. Thank you very much again. Viewers, you have listened to our participants. Now the irony of this situation, because everything runs because of economy, and we know that the economy in Afghanistan is collapsing. The country needs not only new cash, but also some kind of a lien or some kind of treasury as collateral, and Afghanistan's foreign reserves are blocked in New York. And until other countries start recognizing Afghanistan, till that time, that money will not be released and that currency will not be actually printed for Afghanistan. And while it happens, Afghan Taliban don't seem to be ready to reform. And that's why there is this gridlock. In the end, the question comes back to us, where we are sitting. As was pointed out, whether Afghan Taliban have become a liability within a month of their takeover for Pakistan is a big question, and I'm sure our policy makers will keep on debating this in the coming days. But for our program, this was the discussion. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.